Hey everybody, welcome to episode 2 of NFL Dash. I'm Cody Schoeler here with Ryan Root. We're ready to talk about just everything NFL, and we're going to start with the surprisingly what is the biggest story right now. I know we're a little over a week removed from the draft, but the biggest story still is Aaron Rodgers, which is a bit surprising if you would have asked, me a few weeks ago. But, we're just going to dive on into that because you can't talk about the NFL right now without talking about Aaron Rodgers and without talking about the Packers. And is there, what do they do? Is there any way to fix this? We've seen, across all sports, when a guy gets annoyed, when a guy gets disgruntled, they usually get their way. But this is certainly a unique situation that has been brewing for a while. So, what do you think, Ryan? What can even be done right now, and what do you predict will happen with all this stuff?
In terms of what can be done, I'm pretty sure there's very little that can be done at this point. It'd be a miracle, I think, if they're really going to repair this dilemma. But it's really going to come down to what team is going to give up the most to get Aaron Rodgers. I don't think there's really, the biggest teams I see across the board are the Broncos and Raiders. I don't think there's, those are great destinations for Aaron Rodgers to end up in, and also would make the AFC West instantly the most entertaining division. Mm-hmm. But it's just going to be, what do teams want to give up for Aaron Rodgers? And I think that might be the best route for Green Bay at this point, because you had a first round pick to make the guy happy, and you decided to get a corner, which yes was a need, but same day news about the Packers that on the draft day was about getting help for Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers was mad, this or that. They didn't get a receiver until the third round, I believe. So, getting him the help that he needed was not a priority for this team going into the draft. Wasn't necessarily a priority going into last year's draft either, with a first round selection of a quarterback. Mm-hmm. I'm not even taking into account offseason moves by the Packers, but to me, there's nothing they can really do to fix this. It's just going to be who's going to give me the best deal for our quarterback. Because at this point, I think they're going to have to fall to Jordan Love sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when it comes to that, it's just I don't know what. The timing is a little crappy because the teams that you think, the Broncos, well, they had their top, they had their 9th overall pick, but they didn't use that because any team that you give Aaron Rodgers to, that pick isn't going to become valuable. And obviously the Packers would not need a quarterback in return, but there's not really precedent for what this trade looks like. Obviously Peyton Manning went to the Broncos later in his career, but that was free agency. Tom Brady went, but those are all free agency moves. We haven't seen a quarterback in this situation get moved, so I don't really know what that is. And I don't know, if you're the Broncos, do you give up your, do you mortgage the future to get Aaron Rodgers and still not really you're more of a contender. You probably make the playoffs, but, none of these teams that are going to trade for him are going to have a better roster than the Packers. And the Packers, they got close, but they couldn't even do it. So I don't see a scenario in which Aaron Rodgers goes somewhere and he leads them to a Super Bowl. But honestly, the way I'm looking at it is the Packers, they're not necessarily forced to trade him because I think they do have their backup plan. They obviously drafted Jordan Love with the intent to play him at some point, and then Aaron Rodgers went and played like an MVP. But they have a plan in place, and Aaron Rodgers had all this grandstanding of, he can go host Jeopardy and do all these things. I think the Packers kind of weirdly enough have the leverage because, if they could just say, we're not trading you. If you want to retire, you retire. And I think they'll be fine. They don't necessarily need, the Russell Wilson situation was much different, but, the Seahawks didn't really have the lever. If they traded Russell Wilson, they were going to need to get something back and it was going to be different. But the Packers can lose Aaron Rodgers. It would be a big blow, but they kind of have the future set up. So, I with it, the timing, like I said, was weird. And I think, the fact that nobody was able to trade this year's draft capital for him, I think really hurts it. Like I said, because if the Broncos trade their first round pick next year, it's not going to be pick number 9. It's going to be pick number, 20 something. So I would be really shocked if we do see Aaron Rodgers get traded. I think that this might, and I don't know if that means if he'll retire or if he'll just come back and play, but I think maybe after this year we could see him get released. We could see, because I don't think teams are going to be clamoring to trade a bunch for him, because you could get somebody. I mean, the Broncos got Teddy Bridgewater for a 6th round pick. He's obviously not anywhere near the level of Aaron Rodgers, but in terms of the value for that, they're probably good with that, as opposed to trading 3 first round picks or whatever the price would be for a guy who he's like 38, and what's to say that he doesn't get pissed off at them and retire. So I think it's a really interesting situation, but my money would be on the fact that I don't think he gets traded, but then does he play for the Packers, or is he really done like he's saying?
In terms of his destinations, I want to actually kind of capitalize a little bit on that. So the Broncos and the Raiders are kind of the biggest teams that we see. I mean, I can't really picture the Packers not only not trading him in their division, but I don't even think they want him in the NFC. I think they'd want to put him in the opposite conference. That would be their, number one priority. But Broncos and Raiders is what I see. Now, the Broncos, like you said, just got Teddy Bridgewater, just trading away that 6th round pick. Bridgewater is obviously a bridge quarterback, no pun intended, but he's a bridge quarterback going into this next year, and Denver may be playing the draft next year for a quarterback or the year after. So he's not a long-term solution, but he has a considerable amount of cap that I think Carolina is still responsible for paying for.
Yeah, but, probably paying some of it.
Yeah, so they just spent a 6th round pick to get Teddy Bridgewater, a bridge quarterback, to come over. So that instantly puts them down, if you ask me, in terms of like how much they'd be willing to give up to get Aaron. Now we look at the Raiders, who made a couple of questionable draft selections over the years and just trade decisions over the years, giving away Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper, but they're on the rise as well. It's just a matter of time of is Derek Carr going to be the long-term answer? And that's kind of been up in the air for a discussion for Raiders fans, but Aaron Rodgers coming in for the Raiders, I mean, I'm not saying they're going to win the division. I still think that would be up for conversation, but they'd be an instant wild card threat. There's 7 teams that go into the playoff now, not 6. So you got 3 wild card spots to work with. And now that you're going against the Chargers, which are an up-and-coming team, that could be even some more competition for Aaron. I think Aaron winning the NFC North however many years in a row now, other than I don't know if the Bears won the division when they went to the playoffs.
Minnesota's won it a few times, but over the past decade, he's won a large portion of them.
So the NFC North's got virtually no competition for Aaron. I mean, he's not playing in the NFC East or anything, but it's one of the bottom-feeding divisions in the league, and if he's going to make it to the NFC title for 2 straight years and get walloped by the other team both years, it's got to take a toll on him. And I would think he would want to have some more big games, better teammates to work with, a better front office to work with. Which, even then, I think that's another discussion that I think you were kind of bringing up was front office issues are all over the league, ranging in severity. Green Bay kind of being some of the most severe, but Broncos versus Raiders, what front office do you think he would work well with the most?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the biggest issue with the front office is just the lack of communication. I mean, the fact that they never told him that they were going to draft Jordan Love. It's not the fact you don't have to cater. You don't have to let him make the picks, but you have to have your star player just a part of the process. You don't have to select who he wants. But, I do believe that I'm hearing some stuff leading up to the draft that the Packers like Rashad Bateman. And I do think that if he was there at 29, that could have been the pick. But, you have to play the draft as it is, and you can't say, oh, we need a receiver for Aaron Rodgers, even if we don't like one here. But just the fact that they're not talking to him is terrible. So, honestly, I mean, I think both of them would be fine in that regard, of just the fact that they would value that and they wouldn't, do the same thing. But the biggest thing for me is, like, if I don't know how much of this boils down to weapons. That's a lot of what it kind of is talked about. But if he goes to Denver or if he goes to Las Vegas, he's not going to have better weapons. Nobody's got a receiver better than
It's
Devontae Adams.
it's a little debate. I mean, Darren
I mean,
Waller out there would be a great weapon for him to bring back
yeah,
another kind of red zone threat like Jimmy G was a couple years ago with the
but
Packers.
Tunyon was not a great tight end, but probably a top 10 tight end and a guy that he liked. But it's just he's not getting traded to a place with a bunch of stud receivers like Vegas.
Well, then let's look at Denver
Yeah.
then, because their receiving core, I would argue, is as a whole, I would say is in the same realm as the Packers. I mean, they don't have a Devontae Adams,
Yeah.
but Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy alone.
Yeah.
I mean, I think build a young receiving core that he can work with. Plus, he's got Melvin Gordon in the backfield. He's got an up and coming offensive line, so he doesn't lose the protection in Denver. Mm-hmm. And even with the Raiders, not only just Darren Waller, but Henry Ruggs III could have a takeoff sophomore year or junior year over third season. He's a speedster that could definitely help him out with the deep ball. And he had a bit of a rocky, freshman year, but I like how I'm calling them freshman years, but in a rocky rookie season,
mm-hmm.
But it doesn't mean he can't take off when he's playing with one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So I think the receiving core threats across mm-hmm. both teams are definitely considerable for Aaron Rodgers to consider.
Yeah, but I mean, just like if I'm Aaron Rodgers, I'd rather throw to Devontae Adams and whoever than guys, especially because how long do you have left? I mean, maybe it takes Ruggs 2 more years. Yeah, and if he's 34, then sure, you've got time to develop with these guys. But he could be 41 by the time Ruggs or Jerry Jeudy really figures it out, and at that point we don't know. Obviously, quarterbacks can play longer, but he may run out of some time. But I mean, I just think the weapons. I don't know. Obviously, with Aaron Rodgers. The only thing we know for sure is that does not like that GM. He wants a GM gone, and I don't know who you pick when your quarterback gives you that type of ultimatum. But if it does come down to the weapons, then I think it's an interesting situation because I think if this trade were going to happen, and who knows when he privately asked for it. Obviously, it all came out on draft day, but I think San Francisco would have been the team to make it happen because they could have given up.
And that would have been real full circle for him.
Yeah, exactly. And, not even for all those things, but, the idea of, oh no, we can't send him in conference. Ideally, sure, get him out of conference, but what? Maybe you play the Niners in the playoffs. It's not basketball where you're guaranteed to them a certain amount of times. But they could have given the third overall pick, which immediately could have got an elite player. If they wanted to go quarterback, they could have. They probably wouldn't have, but it could have gotten you an elite offensive player to really, bolster what is around Jordan Love. And it would have been a team that I think could offer him an offense that is not necessarily the same, but equal. The weapons obviously aren't the same, but George Kelly and just the Kyle Shanahan fact, he's probably one of the most valuable just pieces of an offense is just a guy like that. So I think, obviously the Niners did call them and try to make that trade and the Packers declined. And I got to think that, especially now with the draft being passed, had to have been the sweetest offer. So, I think the Packers are more just content with letting him retire or releasing him whenever it saves them enough money than they are forced to make a trade.
Well, speaking of the draft, we might as well progress into our second segment here. I mean, the Aaron Rodgers dilemma, I think, Aaron Rodgers dilemma, I'll give the Packers all the credit in the world if they can solve this, but I think the clock is ticking for Aaron going into this next year. But as far as topic 2, I mean, we got to talk a little bit about the draft. We're 2 weeks removed from the draft now, and the biggest winners and losers of the draft. There's obviously some very notable, selections that were made, either good or bad. But, Cody, who's your winner for the draft this year?
This is what should be the biggest topic right now and what everybody should be talking about. I think we're 8 days removed from, or 9 days removed from around day 3. But I went into this thinking that my winner was going to be the Chargers because I really like their draft. But and I went through to do my due diligence, look at everybody's draft, and I really like the Browns draft. So I have them as my biggest winner. Obviously, in round 1, they got Greg Newsome, a cornerback, which was probably the biggest hole left on the roster, to be honest, was a cornerback spot because they did pretty good at free agency of getting some talent. And then they got my guy, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, in the second round, who slid really for, I haven't heard a reason yet to why he had such a huge slide. And so, obviously you have to look at a draft class in whole, which I will, and I like a lot of the pieces in it. But I think it's always a huge win when you can get basically 2 first-rounders. The Browns could have, and they even said they were thinking about it, they could have picked JOK at 26 and would have been a great pick then. So the fact, they traded up to get him, and right when they did that, I was like, they have to go for him because linebacker is a bit of a hole. So I really like the fact that they got 2, day 1 impact makers on a defense that was pretty good and has filled some holes, but definitely needed some work. And then they got 2 receivers, Anthony Schwartz, who is, track fast, and Demetric Felton, who is from UCLA, was a running back in college and is now a wide receiver, but is an elusive playmaker. So I think getting 2 guys that, they don't have to come in and be star wide receivers, and, they can be really good gadget guys to surround Odell and Jarvis Landry. And then they just filled out with some other good selections, nothing too insane. They got an offensive lineman, which probably won't need to start, but could be a good swing guy, James Hudson. They got Tommy Togiai, a defensive tackle, who, that has been partly a need, nothing too crazy. And then Tony Fields and Richard LeCount, who are just 2 guys who could play a decent role on that defense. But, I just like, I put a huge amount of stock in those first 2 picks, and just getting 2 first round talents, I think is huge for a Browns team that is surprisingly, really close to contending and has done so really quickly. And so I like the fact that they were able to do that.
To be honest, I think they're already contending. So
even
so with this offseason, they made great moves in the offseason. Jadeveon Clowney alone is going to make that pass rush extremely lethal. But this draft,
John
Johnson from the Rams is a great pickup as well. This draft is just the cherry on top for the Browns going into next year. If it wasn't for a very, I don't want to call it a random or a trick play, but if it wasn't for the deceptive play on 4th and inches or 4th and 1 by the Chiefs,
if it wasn't for Andy Reid choosing to go for it on 4th down with his backup quarterback, which wouldn't, they're very close.
We could have very well seen the Browns in the AFC title game against the Bills and not the Chiefs if it wasn't just for that one play. And the Browns absolutely gave it to the Steelers in the first round. So their talent level across the board is fantastic. Baker Mayfield has proven his maturity on this stage now, to the point where they are one of the top teams in the AFC. They are one of the Chiefs, absolutely. The Bills, even the Colts, I think, could be up in that in that realm. But the Browns, absolutely. It's a cherry on top for their draft. And I went a little different with mine, considering just the move alone. I thought was fantastic. I remember, watching it live on the stream, and I thought this was easily the move of the draft. And that's the Chicago Bears. Their first 2 picks alone are players that can make a huge long-term impact. I'm talking about Tevin Jenkins and, of course, Justin Fields, that they traded up from 20 to 11, I believe, to select. Regardless of what they gave up, I believe they gave up a first round next year.
Yeah, next year, and I think like a third or 4th, some middle round stuff. But the 2 first rounders this year's and next year's were the big thing. But
this is a guy that could change the dynamic of Chicago football in the future. He's not going to start day 1 behind Andy Dalton there. Andy Dalton is one of the honestly one of the most brightest minds in football, right there with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Very, very smart and veteran quarterback. Justin Fields is going to learn from that in this first year, and he may get to start the latter half of the season if things aren't working out, or if Dalton goes down, or this or that. But the Bears easily, with that pick alone in the first round, I know the Jags got Trevor Lawrence. I know the Jets got Zach Wilson. But the Bears made a huge move to get Justin Fields. This is reminiscent of them getting Trubisky second overall over Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes. But this absolutely kind of saved the league, if you really think about it, because if Fields were to drop any further, Patriots would have snagged him, I think, over Mac. And that pick alone by the Bears should be respected. And then getting Tevin Jenkins in the second round, who a lot of mocks was a late first round offensive lineman taken off the board. They get him with their second round pick, filling out the holes throughout the rest of the roster at receiver and the secondary and whatnot. But they made some great moves in just the first 2 rounds alone. So that to me is the biggest winner of the draft, just considering the risk that the Bears took on that I think is going to pay off sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly have won the headlines by, like you said, making the biggest move, and rightfully so. And and at the end of the day, if you get your guy, it doesn't matter what you gave up, and their entire draft class and will be defined by this.
They didn't pull a Saints in what year was it where they drafted Ricky Williams, where they traded their entire draft?
Yeah, like 1999 or something like that. No, not that. But
it wasn't that bad.
No, but I mean, this is a team that has been ready to compete and just hasn't had the quarterback to do so. So they certainly have gotten likely a step.
Because that defense is still good.
It's still
Khalil Mack is still there.
Yeah, but Justin Fields, he, I think any of the kind of the other than the top 2 quarterbacks drafted, none of these guys are expected to start, and every coach is saying this guy's still our guy. But I mean, Justin Fields can beat out Andy Dalton. There's nothing that is holding Andy Dalton to that job other than the fact that he was signed however many months ago. So he could easily come in day one, and win that job in the preseason and start. And and like I said with the Browns, getting 2 first-rounders, the Bears basically did that with Tevin Jenkins. There's not a lot of depth to their class. Obviously, the giving up I think they had to have given up at least 1 middle-round pick in this. And, but when you get a quarterback and with a chance to be the starter and, end up being a steal of the draft by getting him outside of the top 10, then it doesn't matter the rest that you do. So I definitely think that the Bears – just by doing that, just by, doing something,
we could be looking at a new king of the NFC North if Aaron Rodgers leaves. Yeah. So
just by showing the initiative to do that, they're a huge winner. And so for my loser, and I don't necessarily think that they had the worst draft class, but I do not like what the Cincinnati Bengals did at all. They went with Jamar Chase.
I was about to say, is this including Jamar Chase or is this post Jamar Chase?
Well, so I don't dislike Jamar Chase. I think he's an incredible player. I think he'll be great in Cincinnati. But everything was talked about, receiver and offensive lineman. It was, what they needed, what was deep in this class, and the sense was get Jamar Chase, an elite wide receiver, grab an offensive lineman in the second round, which they did, but they ended up getting Jackson Carman, who was not really the kind of guy that they thought they could get. Will probably even go to guard, I believe. And so I would have much rather them go with Penei Sewell at 5, get your future offensive tackle, and then because the receivers kind of slipped more than we thought. I mean, the guys they could have got when they picked in round 2. They could have got Terrace Marshall or Rondale Moore, or Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Terrace Marshall would have been a reunion with Joe Burrow as well, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. So. I mean, Diami Brown, Amari Rodgers, Tylan Wallace, Dwayne Eskridge, Nico Collins, Tutu Atwell. These guys aren't, obviously are not Jamar Chase, but any of those guys could have helped him out. And they've got Tyler Boyd, they've got T. Higgins, who are really good receivers already. They didn't necessarily need a number one superstar. They just needed somebody else. So, I think that this, Jamar Chase is going to be awesome, like I said, but I don't think that they did what they needed to do. And obviously, it all depended on how they could do that, because if they could have got a Tevin Jenkins or somebody like that in the second round, then it would have been a great move by them. And then just looking at the rest of their draft class, I mean, nothing really stands out. I mean, they did draft a kicker in the 5th round, which yeah, they had kicker problems, but I don't think the Bengals are the type of team that needs to be spending a 5th round pick on a kicker. So I think that is a little odd. And then the rest, I mean, it's solid. They addressed defensive line, another offensive, and some more offensive linemen. So they didn't do terrible, obviously. But I just think that they could have played it a lot better. And I think Penei Sewell and, any of those guys I named, Terrace Marshall or Rondale Moore or whatever, would have been a better combination than Jackson Carman.
So from what I'm getting from your reaction is you're not mad, you're just disappointed. Is that?
Yeah.
Kind of
I mean, yeah. I don't think that they struck out. I don't think that it's terrible. I don't think Jamar Chase was a terrible pick. I just think that they, didn't do as much that with their picks as they could have.
Yeah, because I know, I believe in my mock I had I don't know off the top of my head, but I know for a fact that I was debating between is it Jamar Chase or is it Penei Sewell that they're going to get. And we all saw that it was going to be Jamar Chase. There's going to be that reunion. Mm-hmm. And people were happy, but then you got to take into account, okay, well, now we got to protect Joe Burrow. So I can kind of understand where you're coming from in terms of getting one of those top 2 or 3 offensive linemen and then getting an early second-round receiver like Terrace Marshall Jr., I can see that as a better outcome for the Bengals. So I can kind of agree with your assessment of they could have spread it out a little bit more and understood the talent level across multiple rounds. But
the receivers,
I see what you're saying.
The receivers slipped, I think, a lot more than people expected. We didn't really see the run on them, and the offensive linemen went on a run right at the start of that first round with, Tevin Jenkins and Liam Eichenberg and guys coming off the board. So I think that is where, and then I think they did reach for Jackson Carman. I think there's better guys at the time if they wanted, to get a true tackle, because I don't think they had the answer to that on the roster.
So for what I aimed with the Biggest Loser was we just talked about this with the previous segment, but it's got to be the Packers, because I don't know how you can't instinctively, reactively think, what do we need to do to keep the MVP in Green Bay? I mean, it hasn't happened in 50 years or something crazy where an MVP leaves their team the next season or something like that. I don't remember how long it's been, but it's been a really, really long time with one of the stats I've seen. But it hasn't happened in this millennium. How about that? Or in the 2000s, So the fact that they did not react accordingly in the draft and get at least a wide receiver in the first round. I get there's a hole at cornerback, but the guy said he was frustrated. Get him something to be happy about. I mean, it took them too long to get a receiver. They did not respond well to the news that was surrounding draft day. I think their draft as a whole is kind of subpar average, but in terms of what was at stake on draft day in the first round, they did not react accordingly. I mean, we saw with the Seahawks, when Russell Wilson was frustrated, the Seahawks did get Gerald Everett at tight end. They did get Gabe Jackson at guard. They even drafted another receiver in the draft, which I don't really think was a great selection for him either, but they did reactive things to keep Russell in Seattle. They made sure to keep that pass rush in Seattle so that there was still going to be pressure on the opposing team's quarterback, and it wasn't going to have to be a shootout every single game. They made moves to help Russell out and make him stay in Seattle. Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers wanted a pass rusher. J.J. Watt went to Wisconsin. You'd think, let's put all the chips forward to get J.J. Watt to Green Bay. He goes down to Arizona. Jadeveon Clowney's having issues with the Titans. Why not dump the bag and get the former first overall pick? He goes to Cleveland. So good teams got better, and the Packers are still in this zone of contending but not contending, but we're still contending. I don't know what to think with the Packers every year. It's like they're going to be an NFC title team every year, and they're just going to get blown out every year, I guess is their ceiling. But this draft and their reaction from them as a whole, it was not appropriate considering we're talking about the top quarterback in the league, arguably here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that they didn't react to the Aaron Rodgers news, which can be taken as bad. But I mean, I kind of like the fact that they just did what they thought was best for their team. Like I said before, I do think that they did like Rashad Bateman, and I think they might have selected him in the first round if he made it to them. And then, if they didn't like any of the other receivers, then I don't blame them for going corner, because I think that was a huge need. And honestly, if they had a better corner than Kevin King, they might have made the Super Bowl, because he got toasted on that final drive. But I think like we talked about, there's just so many more issues with this whole Aaron Rodgers stuff than the draft. So I think and I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know if they just decided that they were going to draft for the future and assume that Aaron Rodgers is gone. Who knows? So there definitely is a lot to go with that. But they filled a hole at corner. They filled a hole at center. They did get a receiver later. But I mean, yeah, it's hard to kind of see their response to that and not be a little confused. But I do like their pick of Amari Rodgers in the third round. I think that could be a good guy. And like him, a later round steal, third round. Maybe isn't the latest, but who's another kind of non day one? We're talking day 2, day 3 guy that you think whether now or a few years down the line is going to be a steal in this draft.
Well, I honestly like the Raiders selection with Travis Moehrig or Mayrig. I'm gonna pronounce it both ways in case I get one of them wrong, but yeah. Travis will say that went to the Raiders.
Trevon.
Oh my goodness, his name is Trevon. I'm already off to a terrible start. I have it written down here as Trevon too.
You're focusing on the last name and you forget the first name.
So Trevon Mayrig, we'll go with. It was a great pick for the Raiders considering it's a defense that needs sort of some revitalization, and them rebuilding that secondary with a second-round pick like this, I think is huge considering he was on some first-round mocks. But there's some concern with his back, I believe, which kind of pushed his stock down. But with that being said, I mean, having that good of a safety join the team in the second round, that could be a starter going into week 1 for all we know, but it could be very, very close. I think is a better bet to take week 1, but he's going to make an instant impact for a defense that needs some more flavor, backing them up. The offense kind of gets a lot of the attention with Darren Waller and Josh Jacobs, but this defense needed a good piece in addition to the pass rusher they got in this offseason. I can't remember his name off the Ngakwe. Or Ngakwe, yes.
Yeah.
Ngakwe helping out the pass rush, Mayrig helping out the secondary. I think the Raiders knocked their second round pick out of the park with this one.
Yeah, the Raiders have been a team, at least since Mayock has taken over, that has largely been kind of derided for reaching, and they did it again this year with Alex Leatherwood in the first round. Obviously, last year they did Damon Arnett, and I think it was 2 years before that, Cleveland Ferrell, have all been reaches and have been solid. And they go and get their guys. They like big program guys, but a lot of times they get kind of blasted for that. But this is, I mean, for actually getting a guy who was overqualified to be where he was drafted at. He was the best. I think he was the best safety, and a lot of people thought that. I believe he ended up being the third safety off the board, with two of them coming off earlier in the second round. So I think that's a great value, and could easily be a starter on day 1 because he is that talented. But the guy that I like, which I mean, the first name that comes to my mind when I think of this is Michael Carter, the running back going to the Jets at the start of the 4th round. This was a team that many people thought could start the second pick of the second round with a running back and get Javonte Williams, Michael Carter's backfield mate at North Carolina. Obviously, Javonte Williams went earlier than Carter, going in the second round to the Broncos. But I mean, there wasn't Javonte Williams was better, but there wasn't, I think, a whole lot separating them. Certainly not 2 rounds worth of separation between the two. This was a guy who was, the fourth best running back in the class. And I think out of, honestly, probably all, Najee Harris, maybe not included, goes to the best, place for him. He's really has no competition. Javonte Williams is going in there with Melvin Gordon, and Etienne's going in there with James Robinson. And this is a guy who is going to compete with like LaMichael Pirine, and I don't even know who else. So this is a guy who I fully expect to be the starting running back on, day one and for all 17 games. And he can do, the line's not great. They upgraded it with Elijah Vera Tucker, but this is a guy who is going to come in and he's going to get a lot of reps. And so I really like the pick there of, when you can get a day one starter at running back, which is, people talked about them grabbing a running back in the first round. So the fact that they got somebody obviously not as good, but can still be a starter, and they got him as late as they did, I think that's huge.
Now, real quick, what college did Michael Carter go to real fast?
North Carolina.
North Carolina, okay. I'm not too knowledgeable on this pick, but knowing that it's the Jets and they're in full rebuild mode, it sounds like it'd be great for them, because I know on my mock, I think I had Etienne going to the Jets, and he ended up reuniting with Trevor Lawrence down at Jacksonville. But whatever the Jets can do to get those foundational pieces to go off of, because that's kind of what the Browns did for the past 5 years, and look at that. So, if you're going to build through the draft and get some of these mid-round guys to help out, it sounds like Michael Carter's really going to help out. I do want to stick with the second round, I believe is what he was drafted in. I don't have it written down here, but Azeez Ojulari, I think, is another steal, where he had some first-round considerations as well. I believe he has some knee problems that he's getting over, or that he has had in the past, but he's tested fine in post-knee injury. But Azeez Ojulari, I think, is a great steal. One more time, what team did he get drafted by again?
Giants.
Giants, yes. The Giants' defense is very up-and-coming. They had, honestly, an underrated season, considering it's the NFC East and all the headlines were associated with, what team is going to win with the losing record. The Giants are not playing around, I don't think. I think they're really going to come out from behind and maybe surprise a couple of people going into this next year. They could very well win the division, honestly. And a lot of that has to do with Daniel Jones getting some weapons on offense, but Azeez Ojulari helping out the pass rush, is going to help a lot for this Giants defense that, like I said, is kind of scary in its own right. There's great players across the board for this Giants defense, and knowing that Daniel Jones is kind of, in that that proving season going into this next year. Saquon's coming back. They got all the people to work with. They still got Evan Engram. He's got all the pieces to work with. They just stirred up the defense just a little bit more with the first round talent in day 2. But I like this pick a lot from the Giants. Yeah,
no, for sure. Very talented guy. I thought he should go in the first round. And there was a handful of edge rushers, but he was not one of them. The injuries, without being able to, kind of fully do all the medicals, turned into some big issues. But he's a guy who actually produced in college. There was a lot of edge rushers that had lackluster numbers or concerns. And so I think he has a chance to be one of the best, pass rushers from this class early on. Another guy that I like, a deep cut, I wanted to go with somebody picked real late. So I went with Daz Newsome, wide receiver, also out of North Carolina. I guess I really like North Carolina players. Going to Chicago in the 6th round, there's always receivers are always the one that, you're watching, and it seems like every guy who comes off the board is, a beast, and they've got incredible highlights and numbers, and there's always a lot of good receivers. But he was, I think, a lot better than deserving of going in the 6th round. There's some guys taking over him that I think are fairly questionable. He was very productive in college. Him and Diami Brown were very good, kind of 1-2 punch. But the reason that I like him better than, a handful of other late round wide receivers is just where he's going and the fit Obviously Allen Robinson is in Chicago, but he's franchise tagged, I believe, and he will not be around. Well, maybe he will now, but he seems to want out. It probably won't be around. Anthony Miller's name has been thrown around in trade rumors, and he could be on his way out. And so this sets up for a guy like Newsome, who's drafted in the 6th round, to come in and play right away. Maybe not start, but rotate around, and all you got to do is make some plays, and you're hearing your name called more. It's kind of what Darnell Mooney did for the Bears last year. So I like the combination of talent that I think is better than 6th round, and the fact that I think he has more of a shot than the guys who in the same area went to other teams that have a bit more of a crowded wide receiver room.
Whatever can help Justin Fields transition in Chicago, I think is a great selection for him. And considering Allen Robinson has been kind of frustrated with the franchise, it's planning for the future, and who knows if they're going to get another receiver in next year's offseason. Yeah. But no, I do think that's a good pick for the Bears. And another sleeper that I have, I kind of wanted to try to go day 3 later round, was Jabril Cox, who got drafted in the 5th round of the Cowboys, I believe. And this Cowboys defense that has been kind of a joke for the past couple of years. How many yards is Dak Prescott going to have to throw every single year to try to help his team get back to the promised land when his defense is letting up 30 some odd points a game? I mean, it was a huge discussion at the beginning of the season of how are the Cowboys going to choke this game, or how are they going to pass for 450 yards but then still lose? So getting this help on defense, especially for this linebacker core that also picked up Micah Parsons that they traded back and also got a hold of as well, I think was a great move by them. But shoring up that linebacking core and trying to help out this defense, reach similar feats to what they've had in the past. I mean, I don't know how much is left in the tank for DeMarcus Lawrence. Sean Lee just retired. They got Diggs, I believe, at that safety spot.
Corner. Yeah, last year drafted him.
And that is that Stefan's cousin or brother?
I think it's his brother.
His brother, okay. They like him at that spot as well. So they're getting some of the younger guys to come in and make a difference. But if they're going to get back to that great linebacking core they had a couple of years ago, I think this is a good move in that direction.
Yeah, they're definitely focusing on that linebacker spot, like you mentioned with Micah Parsons, adding Jabril Cox, and then Leighton Vander Esch, who they drafted a few years ago, who's been productive when he's played, but has had injury issues. So defense was a huge sticking point for them, and they went out and they did it. 2 linebackers is interesting. Especially as we get more and more into, nickel defenses and only playing 2. But Jabril Cox is a really versatile player that can kind of be used, where and more than just, off-ball linebacker. So, I think anytime you get a guy that talented who made plays like he did, I mean, he was a beast at, I think, North Dakota State, one of the Dakota States he was at before going to LSU. So, yeah, that's a good pick. And so for my final pick, non-North Carolina, going to the West Coast, going to the Pac-12, I really like Paulson Adebo, corner from Stanford, going to New Orleans because, kind of like I've mentioned with my other 2, I like filling a need that could play with these late-round picks. And obviously corner was big for them. Opposite of Marshawn Lattimore, they've been struggling. I believe they got rid of Janoris Jenkins, and obviously Lattimore's great, but they've had some cap constraints and they haven't been able to really address that spot. And Paulson Adebo was a guy who, I mean, last year, maybe even the year before, was getting first round buzz as a really good corner, a big physical guy who's played really well, but he's had some injuries, hasn't been on the field as much, causing him to slip. But I mean, for a guy that I think is, very talented and can play day 1, going to the Saints, which need to make use of every single draft pick they have, because that's what happens when you're strapped for cash. You have to get these guys on cheap contracts that can contribute for, for whatever 3 years. So I think that's a really good for them. And, just getting a guy who, maybe isn't starting, but at least can be one of the top 3 or 4 corners, and maybe in 2 or 3 years it is starting. So I really like that pick. And that was the 3rd round, if I didn't mention.
And I think that the Saints are in somewhat of kind of a layover period in the post Drew Brees era. They got Jameis to a 1-year contract to help out at quarterback, and they have Taysom Hill, who had to do some restructuring of his contract, but who knows where he's going to be thrown in the mix there, But they're kind of in a layover period of, are we still going to be one of those best teams in the conference, or are we going to be, kind of rebuilding for the next couple of years? I think this season is kind of going to be a proving ground for that. And for that reason, making a pick at corner in the 3rd round is not necessarily filling a hole that's crucial right now, but could be crucial in like a season or 2.
Exactly.
When they lose a couple more players. So I do like that pick at corner.
Yeah, getting a guy that can help now if they do end up competing. Obviously they have the roster surrounding the quarterback to do so, but we question at the quarterback. So getting a guy who can help now or can help down the road is huge, and that's exactly what they did. And so we're going to move on to our last thing we're going to talk about today, and just talking with the end of the draft. We're kind of at the end of the off-season kind of improvement area. Obviously there's still some free agents that are hanging around waiting to sign, but just looking at free agency and at trades and at the draft, which team has made the biggest improvement or will make the biggest improvement from last year to this year? Ryan, I'll let you go first. Who's your pick?
So I haven't talked about them a whole lot. I know I talked a little bit about the Giants that I really like going into next year, but my team for the biggest improvement I honestly have is the Chargers. I think the Chargers are on the brink of something great with Herbert. I mean, if there's anything that we've seen from second-year quarterbacks in the past 5 years, they blow up. Patrick Mahomes, his second year in the league, which was kind of his rookie season / whatever, his second year in the league, he wins MVP, and he has one of the best quarterback seasons of all time. Lamar Jackson's second year in the league, he wins MVP as Michael Vick 2.0. DK Metcalf's second year in the league, he's a national sensation at receiver.
Kyler Murray was the second-year quarterback last year that improved too. Didn't win MVP.
But he had some MVP discussions in the first third of the season.
He made the step from solid rookie year to he's legit.
So I see that same exact thing happening for Justin Herbert.
Absolutely.
Justin Herbert not only shocked a lot of his doubt, or pretty much every doubter that he has. If there's still a doubter of Justin Herbert at this point, I think they're just petty. Justin Herbert at 6'6", right? He's massive. He's athletic. He fights for those goal line touchdowns. He's got a little bit of Cam Newton in him, and he doesn't even have the same frame as the guy. But not only that, his arm has been great. He won Offensive Rookie of the Year, I believe, this year, which well deserved. And
he shattered the rookie touchdown record. Shattered by breaking it by 5 or but I think he had 31 and didn't even play in week 1. So that's
didn't play in week 1. I want to say he didn't play until week 3.
No, it's week 2. He was thrust into the starting lineup.
Was that with the Tyrod Taylor lung issue?
Yeah. So
right. So we saw him a little earlier on than we saw Tua. I know that Tua didn't play until week 6 or something like
later.
That. Yeah. But Herbert's going to shock people his second year, and in a division that is pretty difficult in terms of just one team on there. But you got to go against Denver's defense twice a year. You got to go up against the Raiders twice a year. It's going to have some competition for him. But outside of Herbert, they improved the offensive line, so he's going to be more protected. The defense is coming back, hopefully a little more healthy than last year, and that defense is really dangerous. Just Derwin James alone, I think, makes a huge difference. And they just got Chris Harris Jr., I want to say, right? Or they had him this last year.
I think so. I can't remember where he's at, but they did add Asante Samuel Jr. In the draft as well. So they filled their 2 biggest holes, really. Yeah,
and with that alone, I'm not saying they're going to win the division, obviously. I'm mainly going for a wild card spot here, which a lot of this is based on where Aaron Rodgers is going to end up. So it may sound a little contradictory to what I was saying, that Aaron Rodgers is not going to be in Green Bay anymore. But if if Aaron Rodgers does not get to the AFC West, I think the Chargers will be a wild card team. They might go, well, I'd like to say 9-7, but there's 17 games now, so I'd like to say they could go 10-7. I think they could go 9-8 and make that wild card spot, and maybe take over for a team that's like Tennessee may not be a wild card team going into this next year with the Colts getting better. So, long story short, I think the Chargers could squeeze in at one of those 6 and 7 wild card spots, which I think is a considerable improvement considering all of the potential that they have.
Yeah, I mean, they got a new head coach too, Brandon Staley, the former Rams defensive coordinator. So, I mean, just with that alone, you would expect the defense to improve because, I mean, this was a team that lost a lot of just crappy games at the end. Anthony Lynn, who was a great, person from his, Hard Knocks, appearances, but
I never watched that.
Yeah, he was. It was sucks because you like him as a guy, but the coaching just wasn't there. But yeah, so what just really playing poorly in the end of some games. So there's definitely some wins to get just from some better head coaching. The defense should improve. Like I said, they filled the 2 biggest holes with their first 2 draft picks, which is why I contemplating making them my biggest winner of the draft with Rashawn Slater at offensive line and Asante Samuel Jr. at corner. And, like you mentioned, my biggest just sticking point with them is the division. Division title, barring a Patrick Mahomes torn ACL, and who knows if that can even stop him. They're not going to win the division, so they have to, aim for a wild card. Vegas was hovering around wild card contention at points last year, so they're solid. Obviously, they had the 2 biggest potential landing spots for Aaron Rodgers, so that would be a blow to them too. But, maybe the record won't show it. Maybe, they won't make the playoffs, but I do think that they're on the right path. And, they've got Justin Herbert in just year 2. So I do agree that they are a team that, is remarkably better than last year. But my team, there's a lot of teams that I thought had some potential for this, but I ended up going with the Patriots. And, there's a few reasons. Obviously, which we've gone this long without talking about, but Mac Jones was one of the biggest stories on draft day as well, falling to the Patriots. And while, I thought he would go number 3, which probably might not have been might have been too high for him, but going 15, going to New England, which has a system in place that he likely can run, but he raises their floor. I don't know what he does for their ceiling. I don't know what, he may never be a superstar, but I think the one thing about Mac Jones is I think he is almost guaranteed to just be a solid guy, a guy who can run the offense and do everything within it. I mean, there's a reason that he made the passes that he had to make at Alabama and all this. So I think, while he doesn't, he's not going to do what Justin Herbert did. I don't think he's a huge contender for Rookie of the Year, but I think he raises their floor. And Cam Newton, couldn't pass the freaking ball last year. Like he was a quarterback that couldn't throw. His running was great. And so while the Patriots say, oh, he's a starter, he will not be the starter. I don't think he will, unless he can throw the ball again. He looks great. And in that case, then the Patriots got better too by having a better Cam Newton. But, we saw what they did in free agency, uncharacteristically spendy, but spending a lot of that on the offense, getting 2 tight ends, which the Patriots kind of launched the 2 tight end movement, a decade ago, and getting Nelson Aguilar and getting Kendrick Bourne, who, aren't the greatest receivers, but just getting guys in there. N'Keal Harry, if he ever figures it out, is immensely talented. We saw Damiere Byrd, and we saw a handful of other guys that have been solid there in New England. But just the fact they've got, pieces, they have maybe starting to figure it out on offense and can get something together. I think Bill Belichick is fired up after watching what Tom Brady did. Tom Brady had his prove it year. I think Bill Belichick's trying to do that now. And then the defense, which was still really good last year. It wasn't as insane and obviously was not attached to a contender, but the defense is still really solid. And they added Christian Barmore, who was another one of my guys. that I really liked, and he can
kind
go
of a
in there
steal at
and
that
be
spot.
yeah, exactly, getting him in the second round. Back-to-back Alabama guys for them that I think contribute from day one. So, they have a little bit of a more wide open division. I still think the Bills are the team to beat in there, and Miami is going to be tough. The Jets aren't there yet, but it's certainly not the Chiefs. But they're a team that was not really close, but was we thought could get a wild card spot at times last year. So I like what the Patriots did, and I just think that quarterback is obviously the most important position, and one of the reasons they were held back was because of Cam Newton. And I like the fit with Mac Jones, and I think that he could be a really solid addition for them and actually have an offense around him.
Considering that the AFC East, I mean, for the first time in who knows how long, that the Patriots didn't win the division. I think the last one.
It was 2008.
Did the Jets make the wild card each year that they went to the AFC title game?
Yeah, it was 2008 because that was the year that Brady got injured and he was out for the year.
Okay, so the AFC East has been Pat's County for the past 2 decades. And I think Belichick has seen, the Dolphins and the Bills be playoff contenders at the very least. That probably infuriates him quite a bit because, he's been beaten on those teams for the past 2 decades. He knows the Jets aren't ready. He knows that he's going to terrorize Zach Wilson for the 2 times that he plays in every season. And Josh Allen, when he played against the Patriots his first couple times, did not do very good. Mm-hmm. Now Josh Allen's one of the top quarterbacks in the league in some people's eyes. And you look at Miami, Tua still trying to figure some things out. And I think that Belichick can kind of get to Tua in a way that not many coaches can in terms of coaching a defense. So the Patriots, I can picture being, they were 5-11, I want to say.
No, they ended up with the 15th pick. I think they got like 7 wins.
Were they 7-9?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's the crazy part is they sucked last year, and they had Brian Hoyer quarterbacking at times and all this stuff. And Jarrett Stidham, people thought was going to start the season, and the fact they still got 7 wins, it goes to show you just the infrastructure that Belichick has created. So, if Mac Jones is worth 3 wins, that's 10 right there.
He had 2 wins over the Jets. There's 2 right there, and there's probably an upset victory here or there that I'm missing. But no, for that reason alone, they could be all right, remember there's 17 games. Mm-hmm. They could be 8-9. They could be 9-8. Yeah. They could be in that conversation.
I would not be surprised if they get a wild card spot. Obviously, that all hinges on Mac Jones' ability or Cam Newton's, insane comeback. But he's one of the greatest sports coaches of all time, and I think he won't admit it and he won't ever show it, but I think he is fired up because he watched Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski go and talk about how much fun they were having and still winning and stuff. So I think internally he's a little fired up.
Yeah, he probably didn't like seeing the Bills in the AFC title game either.
No,
he probably thinking we would be there. We would be there if it was us.
Yeah.
But it's going to be interesting to see where it goes forward going into camp. But in terms of an off season, I'd say it was pretty entertaining, but we may not see the end of it with the Aaron Rodgers ordeal, but we'll see how that goes.
Who knows what? There's so many dominoes left to fall. Obviously, still, it's only May. We still have a handful of months before the season gets to it, but that's all we got for today. We'll be doing this every week from here on out, so come back and check us out once again at NFL Dash, and we will be here with you through the off season, and we'll be back with you next week.